If you are a working woman raising children, you need to listen to today's episode. And before we dive into today's episode, if you've been on the fence and curious about my coaching and working with me, then I want you to head on over to Heather Chauvin, CHAUVIN.com/join. As this month, we are hosting a live open house where you can check out coaching on the inside before you even decide to work with me. So head on over to heatherchauvin.com/join for more details and get registered. So today's episode was actually originally a conversation I had with my dear friend, Veronica Romney, on her podcast called the Rainmaker Podcast. So you definitely need to check it out because Veronica is a mentor of mine. I always have some type of mentorship in my life, personal mentorship, professional mentorship. And when I started my business, when I really started the personal development journey, I couldn't afford mentorship. I couldn't afford help. So I would take all the free courses and then slowly I would buy $100 program and then $1,000 program. And I know now in my life that reinvesting in myself, my mental health, physical health, emotional health, mental, emotional, kind of the same thing, but you get the vibe. In my work, all these things, when you look at people and you're like, how did they get there? They didn't do it by themselves. They invested in themselves. And Veronica is one of those people for me. So go check her out, the Rainmaker Residency, the Rainmaker Podcast. And she's just a really good quality human. And so this episode, this conversation I originally had on her podcast. And I asked her, can I put this on my podcast as well? Because I really, really enjoyed this conversation and how she interviewed me. And we talked deeply about raising children while also being visionary women. And what that means is like women with big dreams, big desires who are, you're running the gamut, right? You are leading teams. You have a lot of responsibility professionally. It's like, how do you manage both? So this is a really, really good conversation. And there's some gems in there that, blew Veronica's mind that are, common sense to me. So listen, let me know what you think. But again, if you are a professional woman raising children, this is what we talk about inside of my mastery coaching program. And we have a lot of women who work in corporate who are working within my program. We have a lot of business owners who come in, who work within my program. And if you are also a business owner looking for business coaching, we have a mastery business program as well. And this talks about the sustainability and making sure that you have the right systems in place and all those things. If you're interested in that, register for the open house as well. You can also book a one-on-one conversation with somebody on my team to see if my coaching aligns with your vision. All right. Let's dive in. And you know me, I always love to hear and get your feedback as well. And I want to know what other questions what other conversations do you want me to have on the podcast around raising children while also growing businesses and doing all the things. So you can follow me on Instagram at Heather Chauvin, send me a DM and let me know what other conversations you want me to have. Parenting is personal growth on steroids, right? Starting a business is personal growth on steroids. Mm-hmm. Any intimate relationship or something that you have to create or cultivate is personal growth on steroids. And I actually didn't know what leadership was until I became a parent. Yep. And I think the difference is when you're good at something in your career, you get to even though people bring their work home or you're working from home, but there is a disconnect when parenting is so intimate. Like they know exactly what to say or do to trigger your deepest insecurity because that is their job. Like that is a child's job, is to trigger the shit out of you. Mm-hmm. And when I became a mother, I was 18 years old.
Oh, baby mom.
I was an infant. Yeah. And I went from high school to adulthood. Like, did not get to experience. I was actually supposed to go away to school and everything was done. Like, complete identity shift overnight. Single, on government assistance. And I just remember going, I don't want to be a statistic. I don't want to be a statistic, but having no idea what that actually meant. So leadership in itself, now I understand this, is how you lead, how you show up, how you hold space for people, how you do the thing. And when your children are coming to you or they're doing something, they're triggering the crap out of you, right? Like, there's just something that happens, and there's something that, like, they'll just say one little tiny thing, or they don't tie their shoes quick enough to get out the door in the morning. And subconsciously, they're triggering a story within you that is deeply rooted. And you're like, what is going on? They're there to shake shit up. And when you become a conscious parent, when you decide to do like, oh, there it is, there's a trigger, that emotional response is my responsibility. I'm going to take ownership for my feelings, for my emotions, for how I react. I'm not going to blame and shame my child. And if I do, I will apologize because I'm human, and I will start again. And then this shows up in your business with teams. How you're leading your team, how you're supporting your team. Are you asking for help? Are you not asking for help? Like, the parallel is ridiculous. And a lot of people don't see that correlation. But I feel like if you're actually working on your intimate relationships at home, you can grow faster in your business. And I think parenting is humbling because there's women who don't have children and they're like, I am on my game and I'm actually terrified to have children, or I don't know how I would fit them into my life because their work is so big, right? And I take a step back from that. Like, one, it is supposed to be challenging. I think we have to stop with the perfectionism. And this is for life and work. But I take a bigger step back to this. And this kind of goes way back to where I started or why I do the work that I do. And even the book, like the title's Dying to Be Good, right? Dying to be a good mother. And people think it's my cancer journey. It's actually how, as a woman, I was dying long before my diagnosis to be good for other people. I was dying physically because I neglected my physical body. Like, I don't have time for that. How many times do people say that? I don't have time to work out. I don't have time to go for a walk. I don't have time to see sunlight. I don't have time to feed myself. I don't have time to drink water. Mentally, like, oh yeah, I'm just losing it. Like, we have these cultural conversations and stories over and over and over again that are like, oh, this is normal. It's normal to feel like shit, right? So mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. We have been born and bred as women to not consider our needs at all.
Always,
and then when you do consider your needs, you get these passive aggressive comments of like, oh, must be nice. Well, that's because you have a partner. That's because your children are this age. That's because of this. That's because of that.
That's so true. Yeah.
Yes. So backing up even more, I was noticing these symptoms in my life. Like, I went and got a freaking social work degree and became obsessed with mental health and emotional well-being. And I went to the doctors, I went to the therapist, I did all the things, I read the damn books, and I still felt like I was failing. And when I got the feedback of like, suck it up, buttercup, this is adulthood, this is parenting, that little rebel inside of me that I'm so incredibly grateful for, that was like, not this, there has to be more. And that's when I started jumping outside of this cultural conversation of who I needed to be as a mother, right? And how I needed to show up for my kids. And I started questioning things like, well, I want time to be with my kids, but I don't want to be a stay-at-home mom. Like, I just can't do it. There's that part of me that wants to cultivate and create something. So I can't abandon that part of myself. But when like, everyone is telling me who I should be. So you're doing that like push pull to both sides. Now, Fast forward, like I'm questioning all these things 9 years before my diagnosis. Okay. I start working with people and now they're telling me these things in secret. Like, Heather, I don't want to be at home, but like my husband wants me to be at home. And like it, childcare is so expensive and all the realities of life. And then I get my diagnosis and I'm like, I'm done. Veronica, I checked that suffering box. I was like, I will never suffer again. I can move mountains and I can feel emotional discomfort. I can feel physical discomfort. I will never actively choose suffering again to be good for anybody else. So then I started asking myself, well, if you don't want to feel dead inside, if you don't want to feel chronically fatigued, like burnt out, overwhelmed, depressed, like no money in the bank, how do you want to feel? And the opposite of dead was alive. So I want to feel alive. I want to feel energized. That's the freedom. That's literally what everyone is after. That's why they want more money. That's why they want more time. That's why they want more. But we're after a feeling. We're not after the thing. So if I can go after scaling my business, growing my business, making more revenue in alignment with how I want to feel, because actually how I want to feel is on my frickin' to-do list and my calendar, that is sustainability. I will grow so much more and so much quicker. So if I want to feel connected to my children, my interaction is connection-based. It's not the amount of time that I spend with them doing it out of obligation. If I don't want to feel guilty, what's the opposite of guilt? It's typically connection and love or whatever that is. And if guilt comes up, I look at it. I'm not like, guilt is always going to be there. But I ask myself, is this mine? Or is this the cultural conversation of who I should be? There's so much mixed in all of this. But I have found when I'm more sustainable in my personal life, I'm more sustainable in my business life. And I'm still giving 100% in both arenas, but I'm doing it in a more fulfilling way. Yeah. I've also found that critical thinking skills are rare.
Sure.
And I've been testing this a lot in business lately. If someone wants to make $1 million in their business and I'm watching and observing them and I'm like, holy shit, they must be at like 10 million. Like it looks so big. And then I see a little bit behind the scenes and I'm like, my business is generating more revenue than them. How is that possible? They have more, I don't know, I'm using this because everyone thinks social media is the end all be all for business. They have more Instagram followers. Sure. They have like a bigger presence. They're on every single podcast. Like they're everywhere. You see them everywhere. Why is my business generating more revenue when I'm doing less? And it's just, my mind is blown because I will sit there and I go, one, how do I want to feel? And I do less better. I double down on what is working and I refine a strategy instead of spewing my energy all over the place. And I've done that in personal life and professional life. So yeah, it's so fascinating to me what we think makes success versus the reality of success. And that is both at home and in work. So there's actually a concept that I teach. It's in my book. It's called energetic time management and is managing your energy, not your time.
Okay.
So I'm very connected to how I feel. So when I'm overwhelmed, I'm like, okay, cool. It's just like a big week. If that's spilling into like multiple weeks or a month, I'm like, this is not sustainable long term. Okay. I'll get through it. I'll get it done because I won't give up and I will be a freaking workhorse, but I know that's going to kill me later down the road. Right. Like, yes, I have evidence that happened previously, but I also have evidence that I can get to the same result and feel fully alive and energized, which is exactly what everyone is after. They're not after the thing, they're after the feeling.
Right.
So I have the belief that it's about the feeling, not the thing. So I also don't want to be in this relationship with my children where I'm constantly fighting and arguing with them. So we just did this. My children are currently not in many activities. But this summer, 2 out of 3 decided they want to do soccer. Well, if you start something, you're going to finish something.
Right.
And we get like midway through And all of a sudden, no, like both of them don't want to go to soccer. The anxiety's high, whatever. And I'm like, we're going to process. This is an opportunity to work on processing anxiety instead of, and I'm not going to yell. Like I refuse to yell. If I'm losing it, that is showing me that it's not sustainable. And I would much rather just opt out. And I'm like, you know what? We can sit on the sidelines today, but we're showing up. We signed up for this. We're going to show up. So I said to my little one, I was like, I was joking around. I'm like, so do you want to do soccer next year? And he's like, that was horrible. Never again. So I'm like, cool. But if I was that type of parent that was like, I'm a soccer parent. We're going to do it every year, whether you like it or not. Suck it up, buttercup. Like there's so much more than I'm teaching him. But instead I'm like, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And we can sign up for it or we can just cultivate it at home. But we're still revving up post-COVID. We didn't go the all or nothing, like, okay, now get back into everything. But I have actually really, really observed like all three of my boys are very, very different.
Yeah.
And how we grew up is like, we all do the same thing. And if you suck at it, you get a tutor for it, or we double down and we get you extra sessions. But yeah, we're constantly like, what do you need? That's another interesting thing. My husband and I kind of have this, I'll be like, what do you need from me? Like today, or what do you need from me?
We do that every morning too. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, what do you need from me? And he'll be like, nothing. Or, I have like, the kids need to be at 2 different appointments. So like, I'm going to need support. So there is that communication that goes on, but usually every week it's me that's doing my energetic time management. Instead of trying to control other people's behavior, I welcome them into the conversation. But if they don't want to have the combo, I'm the one that will be aligned and they can manage their own chaos that they've created from their lack of planning.
I'm curious what you feel is your signal at the workplace when you feel that coming. What's the yell?
So you actually helped me with this or kind of planted that seed. I'm a visionary. And a visionary thinks very different. I'm just going to call them employee or a team member, whatever their job is or their focus. For many, many years, I denied my visionary things, right? Like one, it was looked down upon. I was different. So instead of pushing that part of me away, accepting it, I am supposed to be different than everybody else.
Yes.
That is my freaking purpose. That is my job. And I get triggered all the time from my team. Like in my head, I don't think they move fast enough. I don't think they use critical thinking skills as good as I do. And I'm like, wow, that's so egotistical to be like, move faster, do this, da, 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 da. And I'm like, but Heather, it's not their business, it's your business. And if they were as passionate about what you're doing, they would have their own business. Or if they had your drive, they would have their own business. So what I have started doing is when I'm emotionally triggered, I sit with the trigger. I try not to react. Sometimes I still do, but very rarely. But I will. So again, that's my version of yelling, right, at work, because it's professionally inappropriate to scream at somebody like we feel safe to do at home once in a while, like we're shitting on the dog, right? And it's like, so the emotional trigger comes in, and I take responsibility for it. So I'm asking myself, what is this? What are they triggering in me?
Yeah.
Oh, this person isn't doing the work, or my money stuff is being triggered. Like I'm paying them and they're not performing. So then I stop, I write it out, take ownership. I try not to react in my red zone. So when I'm actually physically triggered, I will not have a conversation with the person. So then I get back in my green and I will say like, hey, just curious. Like sometimes we talk about it. I'm not saying I was triggered by this, blah, blah, blah. I'm just curious. The deadline for this was like, it's Tuesday. It was Friday. Just curious what came up for you between Friday and Tuesday. How can we make sure this doesn't happen again? Do we need a project manager? Do we need a different software? Like I'm just noticing you're not hitting deadlines. Are you stressed? Are you overwhelmed? Like we have these conversations. Now, I would say I'm a recovering rescuer, right? So a lot of, I'm sure you see this all the time, Veronica, like visionaries will move mountains by themselves and take people with them and hold all their shit, right? So I identify as a recovering rescuer in the sense that I cannot do the work for somebody else, and they may or may not be in my company for a long time. I will show up for them. I will move mountains for people. I will say, what do you need? But at the same time, I cannot hold space for you to miss deadlines over and over and over and over again. Like that won't be sustainable, and your place here won't be held anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I have had to learn to, I don't want to say hire quick, fire quick, but I've had to learn to not let my emotions get the most of me,
Mm-hmm.
which is why when I'm like, something is keeping me up at night, I'm stressed about it, then I have to go to my friends and colleagues and be like, is it me? Is it them? Is it us? Like, what is going on here? And get an outsider perspective. It's the exact same thing as what you should be doing at home. Is it me? Is it my kid? Is it us? Is it me? Is it my partner? Is it our marriage? What is going on here? But how I lead is I take ownership. I take ownership for my trigger, the story that it's telling myself, communicating. I do not avoid emotionally uncomfortable conversations. I have them quickly because that shit will eat away at you. People say this to me all the time. They're like, you're just so calm. And I'm like, that's your story and perception of me.
Mm-hmm. Well, compared to the majority.
But you have no idea what is going on the inside because that's like emotional regulation, right?
Yep.
Like, you know, when you're afraid to talk to somebody because you're like, I'm just going to tell them that I can't go to their party tonight, or, hey, we need to have a quick meeting, or whatever it is. And you know, you're going to trigger them. You're walking on eggshells around these people, right? Like I say to my husband, I'm like, this is not sustainable. We need to have a conversation. And he's like, okay, cool. Because he knows we're going to talk about it. But if I said that to my mother, she'd be like all anxious and whatever. Like I'm walking on eggshells around those people. I'm the type of person, like, you can say anything to my face. I will react the way I react. It will definitely leave an imprint on how I perceive you in the future and how I can communicate with you. But I'm just so observant of people where I'm like, I'm not safe to go there with them. Or how do people make me feel? So I'm always reflecting on what did they trigger inside of me? And then I process it later. But that's none of their business in the moment. People are always like, okay, I'm just asking myself, how do I want to feel? How do I want to feel? Like, it's what my clients say all the time. How do I want to feel? And they're like, that question is just groundbreaking to me. And it's common sense to me now. Like, that's where my brain goes to. Like, somebody will ask me to do something. And like, I was just invited to something last night, and I love this person dearly. And I didn't get excited about the invite. And I was like, is this aligned with where I'm headed? Is this aligned with my focus? And the answer was no. And then there was kind of a little bit of sadness and disappointment that I'm not going to create space for this. I'm choosing not to create space for this. And then there's a little bit of FOMO. And I'm like, I get to sit with my feelings. I get to sit and process this, because although part of it would be aligned with how I want to feel, in the bigger picture, it's not aligned. And that's like the people pleasing and the boundaries that are required. And we can do that in our personal relationships. Like, my children still need boundaries with me. My emotions still need boundaries with me. And that's where fulfillment happens. That's where joy happens. But it was just like, I just had to start asking myself that question. I didn't want to feel like shit anymore. So what was the opposite of shit? Alive. And then, now I have this whole workflow in my brain that happens.
You really do.
When someone asks me a question.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Can I circle back to something that you said earlier? I wrote it down because you use the word triggers, and this is a word, and I don't know if it's just because the last couple weeks that we've had, as everybody knows on Teams, Q4 is usually a very stressful quarter. It's the last major quarter for you to grab as much revenue as possible to close out the year, to hit your goals, to pay your bills, So a lot of teams are feeling that fire with the temperature going up for sure, and the discomfort of high expectations. But you use the word trigger, and I've been on a lot of conversations, a lot of power hours or genie sessions or whatever in different contexts with different duos, CEOs, rainmakers, different team members. And the word comes up a lot, trigger. Where despite the greatest, kindest, most generous intentions or intentionality, we, in the course of being humans, trigger one another on a very frequent basis. And like what you were saying earlier in the conversation about your children, daily, hourly trigger me. It too happens very frequently in the workplace, in some seasons more than another. So just because you've done such a phenomenal job at work flowing, your emotional regulation. How do you process workplace triggers? And are there transferable lessons and skills from how you handle your children's triggers that you take into your workplace triggers? Because I'm really curious how you compare the two.
So I love this question because
you're smiling.
I teach people how to treat me.
Okay.
And I create the culture in my company.
Okay.
So I don't tolerate a lot of reactivity in my life, professionally or personally. If I know that I don't want to experience something, I have to ask myself, how did I get here? So let's say Q4, for example.
Yep.
I've been in business long enough to know like the cyclical year, right?
Yep.
Q4 is stressful. If you want to hit your goals, blah, blah, blah. Great. Record everything. Have your debrief. And then watch it before Q4 next time. You can get ahead of so much of your trauma, like not trauma, it is traumatic. You can get ahead of so much of your stress. But when you have a core belief that shit is supposed to be stressful, it will be the self-fulfilling prophecy and you will manifest it. So when I had my book launch, March of 2021, again, I'm like, bring it. The most easy thing. I was so prepared. It was like I trained for that race. I could not believe how easy it was, how easy it felt, to the point where I was like, what am I missing? What am I doing wrong? And
it's too easy.
The feedback I was getting from the outside in was like, oh my gosh, are you okay? You must be so burnt out. And I was like, what is going on here? I prepared for that moment for 2 years. So do less better. Observe how did you get here? And again, you have to take some responsibility that, let's just be honest, you're probably a little addicted to stress and adrenaline, and you secretly love that high, which is why, my love of endurance races and getting people to do emotionally uncomfortable things that you may do with me. I started trying to get that high outside of my business, because I can still hit my revenue goals without burning out my team. Remember, if I'm a visionary and I have a lot of mental, emotional endurance and big visions, most likely my team is not going to be able to operate at the level that I want to operate at. So I had to get that feeling outside of my business, so that when I'm in my business, I'm personally not burning everybody out and it's sustainable. I had a conversation with a friend once, and she blew up her business, and I was watching her do this, and her health was deteriorating, and she was attracted to she kept asking me questions, and I was like, I'm just going to give it to her straight. I said, you're seeking something, and you're seeking it inside of your business, and this is why it's not working, and you're blowing shit up. And now because your health is deteriorating, your business is not sustainable, you don't have the right team in place, you stress your team out to the max, everything has crumbled, and you have to start from ground one, and you're actually thinking about selling your house and living in an RV because you're terrified you're going to lose it all. I said, you don't know how to manage your fear. It's manifesting in your business. Everything's going to blow up. And she was so defensive in her reaction towards me.
Oh, for sure.
And I said it with soft edges. And then a year later, after all of this happened, she said, you were right. I just didn't want to hear that because it was uncomfortable for me to actually look at myself. I wanted to blame everybody else. Now, if I go swing this back to parenting, when I started my business, first of all, my life purpose was mothering. High school, mother. Purpose, great. I have a purpose, raise this human. My purpose was to be a mother. Then what happens when your child, I'm using air quotes, child, team member, whatever, business, is not performing the way that you want? You feel like you're failing. So I was like, I need purpose outside of mothering. So now I'll start a business. Okay, now my purpose will be in my client's success. Now my purpose will be in how much money I can make. Oh crap, I'm still doing it. Okay, now my purpose needs to be outside of that. Your purpose, the energy, whatever you want to be fulfilled with, is not going to be found in your personal life or your professional life. It is essentially how you feel, which is how you treat yourself outside of the roles and hats you wear. Like when people say my me time is running my business or running going to the grocery store, like all these jokes people make, I'm like, that's actually not for you. That is still somebody else. So when I'm serving myself, like whether it's like, oh, I want to go on this adventure, or I want to do this thing, or I want to go for a walk, or I want to go to the gym, because I'm saying because I'm a woman, but because I'm so impact driven, whether it's personally or professionally, I have to think, how is this action of fueling myself? Because of course I feel guilty for doing these things, fueling myself going to impact or influence every single human I come into contact with. So I will go to the gym and pretend in my brain that it's a business task. Well, if I feel better, then I'm going to have more energy when I have those conversations with people. Or if I eat this meal right now that I have resistance around making because I quote unquote don't have time, I'm going to have more mental energy to focus when I'm with the kids after work. Everything I do is for a greater good. I have to literally play games with myself to not blow shit up around me. But it's a state of mind. Like I can have a lot on my plate, but I don't ever feel busy. Like it's an energy. I also don't believe in hard things. Like I love Glennon Doyle to pieces. I don't believe in hard things. It's every time I see a cultural trend, especially in the personal development world, like hustle, we all know that the pendulum has swung to the other side. Now everyone's writing anti-hustle books, right?
Yes.
So in 10 years, they'll be writing like, I cannot do hard things. The whole point is, to me, I don't know what it is. I think maybe because I had to learn things rather quickly, like I had to start adulthood sooner. I'm very observant of how people do things and why they do, or I don't know why people do things, but how they do things. And I was like, that wasn't hard today. Like running a marathon is not hard when you, like I pace the whole time. What was actually difficult was walking for that amount of time, right? It was emotionally uncomfortable, which is why my podcast is called Emotionally Uncomfortable. It's not hard to send somebody a DM on Instagram if you're doing sales outreach. Like I could send you a DM now and be like, hey, what's up? That's not hard. What's hard is if you were a potential client and I'm attached to a story of rejection and now I'm sending you a message and I want to puke. That's emotionally uncomfortable. It's not hard. So when I started shifting, because I was addicted to hard got me sick. I could do hard things. I can make my whole life hard. But if I could just make it emotionally uncomfortable, I could not only sit with my fear of rejection or fear in general of like, what if I fail and I don't like finish this, but then I could also sit with my joy when I wanted to like run away, or my good feelings, or I could sit with my discomfort of not responding to my needy friend's text message who asked me what I'm doing on a Tuesday afternoon when she knows I'm fucking working, right? Like, hey, no, I can't do that random thing right now. And I'm just going to hold space and I will respond after. I'm going to hold those boundaries. That's emotionally uncomfortable. It's not freaking hard. So when I'm telling myself, oh, this is so hard, this is so hard, of course I'm going to avoid it. But if I'm just like, okay, it's just emotionally uncomfortable, I'm more aware of what is going on inside of me, which again helps me when I'm leading other people. This is not a hard conversation to have. It's just emotionally uncomfortable because I know I'm going to trigger the other person. So how can I do it in alignment with how I want to feel, which is compassion, empathy.
Yeah, I've had a lot of epiphanies on this conversation about just, if you're not finding what you need in the realm of parenting or business, then don't be so linear thinking and find it elsewhere, because the goal isn't to quiet your ambition or your drive, but possibly there's other arenas that you can fulfill that and not have human collateral behind you in the process, which is like,
and if you avoid your ambition and drive, you will become angry and resentful at those you love. So you got to feed that ambition and drive and know that that is part of your fulfillment as a human. I have been in the Mastery Business Program since July. And I first heard about Heather about
2.5 years ago. I began listening to her podcasts when my daughter was a year old, and I wanted to have everything aligned. I wanted to have a business and be an awesome mom. And then a year after that, I joined the program. Since joining, I will say that I definitely have stepped into my role as a leader, and I've been able to advocate for a lot of changes and be the voice for a lot of performers and see some big changes happening. I've also been able to work on my business and present some workshops and vision a lot for the future of my business. Heather is one of a kind, and I honestly just love her. I feel like she is somebody who can call you out on your stuff, but she also has such an easy, approachable manner to her, and she really digs deep and gets into why things are the way they are. And I think the biggest takeaway from me is alignment and feeling how I want to feel, and also just taking little micro steps to make that happen. I really, really, really love that idea, and I think it's so different from other coaches where it's an all or nothing mentality. And I think that's where this magical growth happens, is in the little steps. And that is definitely what Heather offers, along with so many other things.